My mom didn't raise her voice when she ruined my name. She was standing by the sink, rinsing her teacup, the window open just enough to let cold air in. She didn't look at me when she said it. You know people don't trust you anymore, right? I felt it in my stomach first, like I'd missed a step on the stairs. What do you mean? She placed the cup in the rack, slow and neat. I mean what I said. Folks are asking about you. I just told them what I've seen. My throat went tight. The kitchen smelled like lemon soap and burnt toast. My hands were numb, hanging useless at my sides. What have you been telling them? I asked. She finally turned, her eyes calm, almost bored. That you've been unstable lately. That you exaggerate things. That you make problems wherever you go. The room started to feel too small. I pressed my fingers into my palm, hard just to feel something real. My name is Sarah Miller. I was 32 and living alone in a narrow rental house on the edge of Maple Ridge. A place people only noticed when they needed gas. I had always been quiet. The kind of woman who lowered her eyes when others got loud. I worked as a front desk clerk at a dental office, smiling at patients even when my jaw hurt from holding that smile too long. Most mornings I woke before the alarm, my heart already beating like it had somewhere to be. I lay there staring at the crack in the ceiling above my bed, feeling the cold from the window seep into my bones. I made coffee in a chipped mug and leaned against the counter, waiting for the house to feel like mine. It never did. It always felt borrowed, like I was only staying until someone told me to leave. My phone was always quiet, no missed calls, no messages from Mom, unless she needed something. That Thursday she needed groceries. Her house was only 8 minutes away, but every mile felt heavier than the last. I parked in her driveway and sat there a moment, hands still on the wheel, my chest tight. When she opened the door, she didn't smile. "You're late," she said. "Traffic," I replied, even though I knew she wouldn't care. I carried the bags inside. Her place was spotless, like a model home no one actually lived in. Mark was sitting at the table scrolling on his phone, legs stretched out like he owned the place. "Hey," I said. He didn't look up. "Mom told me you're having issues again." My skin prickled. "What issues?" Mom stacked the apples, one by one. "Don't pretend you don't know. People are saying things." My heart started thudding. "Who is people?" She shrugged. "Does it matter?" It did. It mattered so much it hurt. Mark laughed under his breath. "You always manage to make yourself look bad." I felt heat climb up my neck. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I had spent my whole life swallowing words, and now they were stuck there like stones. I left soon after, telling them I had work. The drive home was a blur. My hands shook so badly I had to pull over once, pressing my forehead to the steering wheel, breathing in short, sharp bursts like I'd just run a mile. That night I lay in bed listening to the neighbor's TV through the wall, wondering what version of me was walking around Maple Ridge, without my permission. And I didn't know yet that this was only the beginning of what my mom had started. When I was a kid, I thought being easy was a good thing. That's what my mom used to call me, her easy child. I didn't fight, I didn't slam doors. I didn't make noise when something hurt. I learned early that silence was safer. My brother Mark was different. He argued, he demanded things. He filled every room he walked into. Mom said he had fire. I had manners, at least that's how she framed it. The first time I realized I was slowly disappearing from my own family was 7 years ago. I had just moved back to Maple Ridge, after my boyfriend left me for someone he met at work. I came to Mom's house with a folder full of community college brochures, nervous but hopeful. "I want to train as a dental assistant," I said, sitting at her kitchen table. My fingers were sweaty, smearing the ink on the pamphlets. She was scrolling on her phone. "That's nice," she said, not looking up. I waited for more. A question, a comment. Nothing came. 2 weeks later she threw a dinner for Mark. Streamers, balloons, a pie she'd baked herself. She posted pictures online about how proud she was of him for getting a small raise at the hardware store. I stood there that night holding a paper plate, feeling like I was made of glass. No one asked me about school. No one even remembered I was planning anything. When I went home, I cried into my pillow, pressing it over my mouth so the sound wouldn't escape. That was the first time I thought, maybe she doesn't see me at all. The second realization was worse. Dad died 3 years later. It was quiet, no long illness. Just a call in the middle of the night. I sat in the hospital hallway with Mom, the vinyl chair sticking to the back of my legs, the the smell of disinfectant burning my nose. At the funeral, people hugged her, told her how strong she was. I stood beside her, my hands folded, waiting. She didn't introduce me to anyone. She didn't say my name. When relatives asked if I was helping, she smiled and said, "Sarah keeps to herself. She always has." Later I found out she'd been telling people I was distant. That I didn't support her after Dad died. That I moved on too fast. I hadn't moved on at all. I just cried in private. After that, the small lies started to spread. Someone at the grocery store asked me if I was okay after. What happened? A woman from church touched my arm and said she hoped things would get easier for me. At work, my manager called me into her office and asked, gently, if everything in my life was stable. I felt like I had stepped into a story I didn't write. The worst part was that Mom never said these things to my face. She was careful. Always kind when it was just us, always cutting when I wasn't there to hear it. One night I overheard her on the phone while I was dropping off her mail. I stood in the hallway, keys in my hand, my chest tight. "She's always been like that," Mom said. "Too sensitive. Makes problems where there are none." I pressed my back against the wall, my knees weak. I felt small again. Like I was 12 and hiding in my room, while she talked about me to someone else. When I walked into the kitchen, she hung up and smiled. "Everything okay, honey?" I nodded. That was my mistake, I always nodded. The rumors followed me into every corner of Maple Ridge. People stopped asking me for favors. Old friends stopped returning calls. Even at work, patients began requesting the other receptionist. I tried to defend myself once, just once. I told my aunt that Mom had been exaggerating, that I hadn't done anything wrong. My aunt listened politely, then said, "Your mom is worried about you. That's all." I realized then that my voice didn't weigh as much as hers. It never had. That night I sat in my car in my driveway, engine off, hands gripping the wheel, my chest aching with something that felt like grief. Not for Dad, not for my old life, for my name. And I had no idea yet how far my mom was willing to go to make sure that name stayed broken. I almost threw it away because it looked like junk mail. Plain white envelope. No logo, my address typed instead of written. I opened it standing at the counter, the edge of the paper slicing my finger without me feeling it. It was from a local lawyer. My eyes moved over the words twice before they made sense. It said there had been a family meeting about my father's estate. It said decisions had been finalized. It said my presence had not been required. I sat down hard on the kitchen chair. The room tilted. My finger started to sting. A thin red line forming, but all I could think was, what meeting? I drove to Mom's house without even putting the letter in my bag. My hands were shaking the whole way. My heart thudding like I was doing something wrong just by showing up. She opened the door, already frowning. "You should have called first," she said. I held the letter out in front of me. "What is this?" She barely glanced at it. "It's done, Sarah." "What's done?" "The estate. Your father left things behind. We handled it." My ears rang. "Without me." She folded her arms. "You've been difficult lately." I didn't want drama. I stepped inside without being invited. My legs felt weak, like I'd walked too far on them. "It's my dad," I said. "You can't just cut me out." Her face hardened. "You weren't close to him." My mouth fell open. The kitchen light buzzed above us, too loud. "That's not true," I whispered. She shook her head slowly, like I was a child telling a story. "People saw you barely come around after he passed. I had to protect this family." "Protect it from what?" "From me." Mark walked in, then tying his shoes. He stopped when he saw my face. "What's going on?" "She's upset about the will," Mom said calmly. I turned to him. "You knew about this?" He hesitated just long enough to tell me everything. "Mom said you didn't want to be involved." My knees almost buckled. "I never said that." Mom placed a hand on his shoulder. "She forgets things sometimes." The room went silent. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. "I don't forget things," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, tight and shaky. Mom's eyes narrowed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I left without another word. I don't remember the drive home. I only remember sitting on my bedroom floor, my back against the bed. My breath coming in short gasps like I'd been underwater too long. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My body felt locked. Later that evening my phone started buzzing. Messages from relatives I barely spoke to anymore. "Your mom is worried about you. We hope you get the help you need. Family matters should be handled with care." I stayed at the screen, my fingers numb. Help. For what? The next day at work my manager called me in again. She closed the door softly behind me. "Sarah," she said, sitting across from me, hands folded. "I've been getting calls." "From who?" I asked. "Your mother." My chest tightened. Why is she calling my workplace? She said she's concerned. That you've been having trouble coping. That you might not be stable right now. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's not true. She studied me for a moment. "I need you to take the rest of the week off." I walked out of that office with my ears burning, my legs barely carrying me. By the time I reached my car, tears were streaming down my face, blurring the parking lot lights into long streaks. That night Mom called me. "You embarrassed me today," she said. Like she was commenting on the weather. I stared at the wall, my throat burning. "You called my job." "I had to. They should know what's going on with you." "What's going on with me?" I whispered. She sighed. "You've been acting strange for months. I can't pretend everything is fine anymore." I hung up without saying goodbye. I sat on my couch, the phone heavy in my hand, my whole body aching like I'd been carrying something too big for too long. That was the moment I understood something I had been avoiding my whole life. My mom wasn't misunderstanding me. She was rewriting me. And I had no idea yet how I was going to stop her. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a waiting room. Every night after the lawyer's letter. After the phone calls to my job. After the looks people gave me at the grocery store. I walked from room to room like I was searching for something I had lost. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with my eyes open, the ceiling fan turning slow circles above me. My chest felt heavy. Like someone had placed a stone there and forgotten it. I replayed my child the way people replay old movies they don't even like anymore. The time I won a spelling contest in 5th grade. And Mom didn't come to the ceremony because Mark had soccer practice. The night I stayed up sewing a button back onto her coat while she slept on the couch. The way she used to say, "You're so low maintenance, Sarah," like it was a compliment. Low maintenance meant I didn't cost her anything. At 3 in the morning I stood in the kitchen drinking cold water straight from the tap, my hands trembling. I caught my reflection in the dark window. My eyes looked hollow. My face didn't look like mine. I started to wonder if maybe she was right, maybe I was unstable, maybe I did imagine things. Then I opened my email. There were messages from coworkers I hadn't seen since I was sent home. "Hope you're okay, we're here if you need support. Take care of yourself." No one said. "We know this isn't true." I sat down at the table, my shoulders sagging, my fingers curled into my sleeves. The weight of it all pressed down on me until my breath came shallow. That night I dreamed of standing in a room, full of people who all wore my face. But every time I tried to speak, my mom's voice came out instead. I woke up soaked in sweat, my heart racing, my pillow damp under my cheek. I went to her house the next day, even though every part of me screamed not to. She opened the door and looked surprised to see me. Not pleased, just surprised. "I need you to stop," I said, my voice shaking. "Stop what?" "Calling my job. Telling people I'm unstable. Talking about like I'm not even there." She tilted her head. "You should be grateful I care this much." My hands were cold, even though the house was warm. "You're ruining my life." She smiled, small and tight. "You're doing that yourself." I left again, my legs burning, my chest tight. Might that just run a fill? That was when something inside me finally shifted. It wasn't anger at first. It was exhaustion. A deep, bone-level tiredness that settled into my muscles and refused to move. I was tired of defending a version of myself I didn't control. Tired of explaining things that never needed explaining. Tired of hoping she would suddenly see me. That night I sat on the floor of my bedroom, back against the bed, my knees pulled to my chest. I held my phone in my hand, scrolling through old photos. Me and Dad at the lake. Me at my high school graduation, Mom not in the frame. Me holding Mark's baby while Mom stood just outside the shot, smiling at someone else. I wasn't invisible. I had proof. My chest hurt, not like panic but like something stretching open. I opened my laptop and typed my name into the search bar. Pages came up from local community boards, comments I had never seen before. Someone had written that I had issues. Another said I had always been a little off. One even suggested I shouldn't be working with people. I closed the laptop, my hand shaking. Tears finally sliding down my face. They dropped onto my jeans, dark spots spreading slowly. I thought about calling Mom. About apologizing. About telling her she was right. Instead, I sat there in the quiet house and listened to my own breathing. I remembered something Dad used to say when I was little, when Mom and I would argue over nothing. Don't beg people to love you. Stand where you can breathe. For the first time in weeks, my breath went all the way in. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I didn't know how yet. But I knew one thing as clearly as I'd ever known anything in my life. I was done letting my mom tell the world who I was. The next morning I woke up with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't hope, it wasn't confidence. It was resolve. My hand still shook when I poured my coffee. But I didn't spill it this time. I sat at the table with my laptop and stared at the blank screen, my heart beating hard enough I could feel it in my ears. If my mom had been telling stories about me, then there had to be traces of those stories somewhere. I started with my email. I typed my name into the search bar. Dozens of threads came up from the dental office, things I had never been included in. One message from my manager, dated 2 months ago. Sarah's mother called again today. She says Sarah is struggling and may not be reliable right now. Please document any issues. I felt a chill run through me, even though the kitchen was warm. My fingers tingled like I had touched ice. Again. That meant she hadn't just called once. I forwarded the email to a new folder and titled it Evidence. It felt strange. Like I was building a case against my own life. Then I went through my call logs. I hadn't blocked her, so everything was still there. Missed calls on days I had been at work. Messages where she said she was checking in. Right before my manager emailed me. I took screenshots of everything. Next I searched the community boards online. I had avoided them for months because seeing my name made my stomach twist. But now I forced myself to read every post. People didn't mention Mom directly. They didn't need to. They all sounded the same. My cousin's neighbor said this about her. Her own mother is worried. I've known the family for years. I copied the links into a document, my jaw clenched so tight it started to ache. By noon my head was pounding. A dull pressure behind my eyes. I stood up to stretch and nearly fell over. My legs felt weak like I hadn't eaten in days. I called my aunt, the one who had always seemed neutral. Can I ask you something? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated. About what? About what my mom's been telling people. There was a pause, long enough to hear my own breathing. She's worried about you. My aunt finally said. What exactly has she said? I pressed. Another pause. She said you've been having trouble coping since your dad passed. That you've been confused. That you might not always remember things clearly. I closed my eyes. My throat burned. Has she ever said this to you directly about me, before this year? No, my aunt admitted softly. Then why believe it now? Silence. That silence felt like a door closing. I hung up and rested my forehead on the table. The cool wood pressing into my skin. I stayed like that until the ache in my neck distracted me from the ache in my chest. In the afternoon I drove to the lawyer's office listed in the letter. My palms were slick with sweat when I walked in. My heart thumping like it was trying to break free. The receptionist looked up. How can I help you? I'm here about my father's estate, I said. My voice sounded small in the quiet room. She frowned at her screen. Your mother handled everything. I wasn't invited. I replied. She bit her lip. Sorry. I can't discuss details without your mother's consent. I felt heat rush to my face. She told you I didn't want to be involved, didn't she? The receptionist didn't answer but her eyes flicked away. That was my first real setback. I walked out of the building feeling like I had been slapped. My chest tightened again, my hands going numb. For a moment I just stood on the sidewalk, staring at nothing, wondering if I had overestimated myself. That night I spread everything out on my living room floor. Printed emails. Screenshots. Handwritten notes with dates and times. It didn't look like enough to fix a broken reputation. I sat cross-legged among the papers, my back sore, my eyes burning. I thought about tearing it all up, about letting her win. Then my phone buzzed. A message from a coworker I barely spoke to. Hey, I just wanted you to know your mom came by again today. She was asking about your schedule. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, my pulse roaring in my ears. She wasn't stopping. She was still moving. Still shaping the story while I sat here collecting pieces like it was already over. I set the phone down slowly, my hands shaking so badly I had to hold my wrists. All I had were fragments. No power. No authority. And for the first time since I decided to fight back, I wondered if I had started something I couldn't finish. It didn't happen with shouting. It happened with a calendar. I was sitting at my table the next morning, staring at the stack of papers, when something finally lined up in my head. The dates. Every email from my manager. Every missed call from Mom. Every rumor that reached me through someone else. They weren't random. They followed my schedule. She called my workplace only on days I worked mornings. She told relatives things right before family dinners. She posted vague comments online on Sundays, just after church. She wasn't worried. She was strategic. My hands were steady for the first time in weeks as I typed an email to my manager. I attached everything. Every screenshot, every message. Every timeline I had built. I didn't beg, I didn't explain too much. I wrote simply, I need you to see this. I have not been unstable, I have been targeted. When I pressed send, my chest felt hollow, like I had finally let something heavy go. Then I did something that made my stomach flip. I emailed the lawyer. I didn't ask for details. I told him I had documentation, that my exclusion from the estate meeting was based on false information provided about my mental state. I told him I would be seeking independent counsel if this wasn't addressed. I stared at the sent folder, my hands tingling, my pulse loud in my ears. There was no turning back. 2 hours later my phone rang. It was my manager, she said, her voice different. Slower. Careful. Can you come in today? When I hung up, I sat very still. My legs felt weak, like I had just stepped off something high. At the office she didn't bring me into her usual room. She closed the conference door instead, the click loud in the quiet space. I had no idea, she said after reading everything. Your mother never mentioned calling us more than once. She didn't. I mentioned it every week. My manager leaned back, rubbing her temples. I'm sorry. It was the first time anyone had said that to me in months. Before I left, she said, I've already asked HR to document this. No one outside of this office is to contact us about you again. I walked out into the parking lot, the sun too bright, my eyes stinging. I stood there breathing in hot air until the shaking passed. Then the lawyer called. He didn't sound angry. He sounded uncomfortable. We need to schedule a meeting with you and your mother, he said. There had been misunderstandings. That word made my jaw tighten. Misunderstandings. We met 3 days later in a small office that smelled like old paper and coffee. My mom arrived first. She was calm. Hands folded in her lap like she was waiting at the doctor's office. She didn't look at me when I walked in. The lawyer cleared his throat. We've reviewed the documentation Sarah provided. Mom finally turned to me, her eyes sharp. You went behind my back. I went for the truth. I replied. Family reaction. The lawyer laid out the timeline. The calls. The emails. The statements from my workplace. My aunt was there too, invited as a witness. She sat stiffly, her purse clutched in both hands. When the lawyer said, it appears that information about Sarah's mental state was exaggerated or misrepresented. My aunt's mouth fell slightly open. She looked at Mom. Is this true? Mom didn't answer. Mark shifted in his seat. Mom. She stared at the table, her jaw tight. The lawyer continued, explaining that the estate process would have to be reviewed. That my exclusion had not been justified. That any further claims about my mental health would require professional documentation. The room, my ears rang. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. My aunt finally spoke. You told us she was confused. That she didn't remember things. Mom's voice was quiet when she replied. Was protecting her. I laughed before I could stop myself. It came out wrong, sharp and broken. From what? She didn't answer me. My aunt's face changed then. Not anger. Something like grief. I believed you, she said softly. We all did. Mother's silent collapse. The meeting ended without yelling. No one raised their voice. No one threw anything. Mom gathered her purse and stood up slowly. For a moment she looked small, like the air had gone out of her. She still didn't look at me. As we walked out into the hallway, Mark fell into step beside her. Mom. Why didn't you just tell the truth? She stopped walking. The hallway was quiet, the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. Her voice wasn't shaking, it wasn't loud. It was empty. I stood a few feet behind her, my hands cold, my heart pounding. I waited for something. An apology. A reason. She turned halfway toward me, her eyes tired. You always make things complicated. Then she walked away. I stood there long after everyone else had left, my breath coming slow, my body heavy. The truth was finally out. And it hadn't given me the relief I thought it would. The house felt different when I got back that day. not lighter. Not happier, quieter. I stood in the doorway with my keys still in my hand, listening. No TV through the wall. No car passing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the clock above the stove. For months my mind had been loud. Full of arguments I never had out loud, questions I never asked, answers I never got. Now there was space. I put my bag down and walked into the kitchen. The papers were still on the table where I had left them. I didn't need them anymore, but I didn't throw them away either. I stacked them neatly and slid them into a drawer, like I was closing a chapter without tearing it up. My phone buzzed. It was my aunt. I didn't answer at first. My thumb hovered over the screen, my chest tight. Then I picked up. "I owe you an apology," she said before I could speak. I leaned against the counter. The cool surface pressing into my back. For what? For not asking you. For believing what was easier instead of what was right. Her words sat heavy in the air between us. I swallowed. "I didn't know how to make you see. I should have tried harder," she replied. After we hung up, I slid down onto the kitchen floor, my knees pulled to my chest, my forehead resting against them. I stayed there until the ache in my legs made me move again. At work the next week, things were careful. My manager checked in with me every morning, not like someone watching for cracks, but like someone making sure the ground was steady. Coworkers smiled more. Some avoided me embarrassed. I didn't push them, I didn't need to. The lawyer sent a follow-up letter confirming I would now be included in things related to Dad's estate. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about presence. Mom didn't call. Days passed. Then weeks. I saw her once at the grocery store. She was in the frozen food aisle, comparing boxes of lasagna. For a moment I considered walking the other way. My stomach tightened, my pulse quickening like it used to. Then I didn't. I walked past her. Close enough to feel the cold from the freezer case, close enough to hear her breathing. She didn't look at me. It didn't hurt the way I expected it to. It felt like stepping into sunlight after being inside too long. That night I sat on my back steps, the wood rough under my palms, the air cool against my skin. I watched the sky change from orange to gray, listening to the distant sound of traffic on the highway. I wasn't waiting for anything. I realized I hadn't checked my phone in hours. The next morning I woke up with that heavy stone in my chest. It wasn't gone, not completely. But it wasn't pressing so hard. I stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth, my reflection clearer somehow, like someone had wiped a foggy mirror. I went to work, did my job. Came home, simple things. Honest things. A message came in from Mark one evening. "Mom's been quiet, I think she's embarrassed." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering. Then I typed back. "That's hers to carry." I didn't feel cruel writing it. I felt calm. Later I took out the old photo album Dad kept. The one Mom never touched. I sat on the couch flipping through pages that smelled faintly of dust and paper. There I was at 10, missing a front tooth. Grinning at the camera while Dad stood behind me, hands on my shoulders. I pressed my finger to the picture, my chest tightening. Not with pain. With memory. I thought about the name I'd been given at birth. How easily it had been bent, twisted, reshaped by someone who was supposed to protect it, and then I thought about how I was using it now. On my emails. On my forms. On my life. No one was changing it for me anymore. I closed the album and set it beside me. The weight of it solid and real. For the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel like I was standing in the aftermath of something broken. I felt like I was standing in something that was mine. For a long time, I thought revenge would feel loud. I imagined it like a moment in a movie, where everyone finally sees the truth at the same time, and the person who hurt you can't escape it. I thought I would walk away feeling powerful, like I had taken something back. It didn't happen like that. What actually happened was quiet. The truth came out in small rooms, in careful voices, in paperwork and timelines. My mom didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She didn't suddenly understand me. She just stopped being able to control the story. And that was enough. I learned something about dignity that I never understood before. It isn't something someone gives you when they finally treat you right. It isn't something you earn by being patient, or forgiving or quiet. It's something you practice when you stop asking the wrong people to define you. For years I kept showing up to a house where I wasn't really welcome, hoping that if I stood still long enough I would be seen. I kept lowering my voice, shrinking my needs, smoothing over moments that should have been named. Distance felt like failure to me. Now I know it isn't. Sometimes distance is the only place you can hear your own thoughts. I don't know what my relationship with my mom will look like in the future. Right now it looks like space. Like silence. Like a grocery aisle where we don't meet each other's eyes. And that's okay. My name still moves through Maple Ridge. But it does so on my terms now. At work. On letters. On the quiet parts of my life that no one else gets to shape. I didn't build a new name by destroying hers. I built it by standing where I could finally breathe. And maybe that's all survival ever really is, not winning, not proving. Not shouting the truth until someone else accepts it. But choosing the ground you stand on and deciding, gently and firmly, to stay there.